to the computer. There we go. And we can talk about the arts and cultural plan and the process behind it. Um, I am a slide deck person, so I've got some slides to share with y'all tonight. But before we kind of jump into the details of the arts and cultural plan itself, my question for y'all tonight, the big one to kind of orient us, is I want to ask, coming into this meeting, can y'all see my screen?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Coming into this meeting, what what's your knowledge about the plan? Like, does anybody have any expectations about it? Did you participate in the last version? What are you curious to learn about the process for the upcoming plan? So that can help kind of facilitate our conversation tonight.
Um, I'll talk a little bit.
Sure.
I do think I remember, I mean, I've been to a couple of different types of meetings about this. I remember one a long time ago when I was actually very new to a lot of these ideas. They had a big meetup. I think it was in Eureka Park when that was the space they had there. And they talked about different ideas and people put stickers on things that they felt really were more what they were looking for. And I think that was before they made the 2040 plan, right? So now we have the 2040 plan. And I do think that we were kind of using that. I could be wrong, but I feel like there was a certain kind of effort when we first started the Year of the Artist and some of these artist residencies was to align some of the work we were doing with some of the goals of that 2040 in general plan for the city. Is that what you remember?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, with the 2040 comprehensive plan adopted, gosh, it's been a couple of years now. So back in 2020 was when council approved that. They definitely had kind of the umbrella priorities for the city that all of the other plans are supposed to either complement or follow. Conveniently, I have those written down because I can never remember them off the top of my head. So within City Plan 2040, the focus areas are on interwoven equity, healthy communities, harmony with nature, livable built environment, responsible regionalism, and resilient economy. So those were their focus areas that everybody came to for City Plan 2040. So some good stepping stones to start with for how we think about the next iteration of the arts and cultural plan. Anybody else? Any notions about kind of what this process might be or specific things that you want to make sure that we cover tonight?
I don't know if it's connected, but I'm excited about the new skate park. I think that's like
Ooh.
different from Roanoke Arts and Cultural. That's like Play Roanoke or the whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
But all that connects. Like I've always thought skateboarding is, I mean, it blends like arts and culture and like all people because it's like sort of all encompassing. And I know that that's going to be done hopefully soon. And I mean, I feel like we could connect with what's going on over there.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I think, when you look at 2040 and you see one of those goals being harmony with nature, I think kind of the parks and the places that we play, especially with something like a skate park that has like a certain like subculture along with it, I think it's definitely a valid overlap with broader arts and culture. Um, I definitely think that that is a component of this that we can build on and amplify even more. Mhm. Cody, I think I saw you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I've not really been involved with any arts projects directly. I was working with the Art Space ROA team, but I've been around a lot. And even though I've been around so much, I don't even really know what all the upcoming projects are. Like I know some small ones, but kind of on a long term, large, big picture scale, I really don't know. So I'm excited to learn.
Awesome. Well, those are some great starting points. So if no objections, y'all let's jump in a little bit and kind of talk about what's ahead. We the first step for me when I begin something big and ambiguous like this, for somebody who is not a professional planner, doesn't have that as a background, but is just kind of like very type A in my approach to things. I always like to set some sort of a North Star. Um, how do we talk about the arts and cultural plan? In the broader content of City Plan 2040, how do we drill it down? How do we make it, relevant to what we want to do over the next decade and keep building on all of the good work that's happened since the first plan in 2011? So when we look at that, there's a lot of stuff that as we set our vision and our path forward that comes out of it. One of that is a shared vision. Um, so we have, a clear community driven roadmap, for what we want to see next within our community for arts and culture. We've got our core values that we're going to talk about here in just a couple of minutes and some focus areas that we're going to talk about after that. Part of this, because it's a plan, right? We have to be able to implement it. So we have to come up with some actionable goals that are tangible at the end of the day. So it's not so ambiguous or so high level that nothing can actually move forward. And then ultimately, we want to look at the impact that we're having on our communities. That's everything from our individual neighborhoods up to areas of the city or to City Plan 2040. How do we make these longer term plans that can support the region and not just the city, even though they might start here, kind of a look. And then lastly, how do we make sure that this lasts? We only go through the planning process kind of every 10 years. So we have we have a long runway ahead of us to make sure that we're being really comprehensive in our approach. So we're all as busy as we've been with the last iteration of the plan as we come out of this process. So even that, when we've got kind of the focus areas, still feels a little ambiguous and kind of like hard to tackle and break down, right? So whenever I personally look at something that feels kind of really overwhelming to look at, I always break it down into smaller steps. And that's how we're going to approach the planning process this year is that, essentially every quarter of the year, we're going to enter into a new phase. So right now, we're in the discovery phase. We're having conversations like these. We've had them with the Arts Commission. We've had them with our broader steering committee that's going to be kind of behind the scenes and leading this work. We're having conversations with our creative community. We're having conversations with the arts and cultural organizations that everybody supports and everybody is so proud of to make sure that we're hearing from the community, since at the end of the day, even though this is a city plan, it's ultimately a community driven and a plan for community. So starting there with our discovery has been really, really important from a conversational standpoint. And it's happened within this space within the last decade since the first plan was written. So we're looking to other areas who have put out other arts and cultural plans more recently to see, are there tactics, are there types of conversations that they've had that we think are interesting and might be relevant to us or might spawn kind of a different idea. So that's really what we're focused on for the first few months this year is kind of gathering all of our reference points so we can go forward and be really well informed and intentional for these next few phases. So as we transition out of discovery and we move into listening, that's where we really begin to focus on community engagement. The first time or the only other time that a plan was made for arts and culture, there's an incredible community turnout for all of the focus groups, the surveys that went out, et cetera. We've seen that through ArtSpace, and the community still has a lot to say. It has a lot of contributions that folks want to bring forward. So I'm personally really excited about listening. Many of us have been involved in the story circle exercise to this point. I think story circles are going to be a huge component of how we go out into the community and talk about shared experiences through arts and culture and how we can kind of bring those to the city at scale and at a larger dimension. So I think that's going to be a large portion of our work this year, right? There are a lot of folks to talk to within the scope of the city. Yeah, go ahead.
There we go. I've been trying to figure out the raised hand feature for a second. It was on a point a couple of minutes ago. Um, uh, on the um, discovery and the conversations that we're having on how to achieve the goals around, um, I don't need to turn the video on, it's fine. Um, about community impact in spaces, on
Mhm.
the robust economy and the equitable, inclusive nature of it. Um, I know the programs I've been building out with Busk Roanoke and the growing of the street performing community across downtown and Grandin already. I know it's all coming along late, but my name's not on the screen as Jefferson Rose. Just want to be involved in these conversations more as they progress.
Awesome. Jefferson, I will put you down. I appreciate that. I always welcome more folks to the table who can contribute to the conversation. Thank you. So, coming out of that listening phase, Natalia, welcome. It's always kind of funny. Natalia's just 2 doors down from me. So, hey, neighbor.
Hello,
Um,
sorry I'm a little late.
no worries. Hey, we all got here eventually, right? Tonight, some of us just unusually early. Um, so after we come out of our listening phase this year, we're going to kind of go into the working mode where we actually need to come up with the plan, right? Um, so we're going to go kind of down. We're actually going to begin building out the plan based on everything we've heard from the community, pulling together all of the data points from surveys, story circles, other conversations to actually begin to build the case for what this next iteration of the arts and cultural plan needs to be. So we can get kind of our bedrock foundation and then begin to look at what are those specific goals and strategies that we want to come out of this, which ultimately is going to take us through the end of the year when we actually begin to write the plan. So our current goal is we're going to have a draft of the plan that's going to be ready for the broader steering committee to review in early December, with hopes that we'll have all of the edits and the revisions done in January. Knock on wood that that goes smoothly, and then we can share it more broadly. But that's kind of what our year like. It's those 4 cycles between discovery and listening and having conversations, kind of going head down into planning mode to kind of tie everything together that we've heard, and then ultimately bring it all together in the next iteration of the arts and cultural plan. So we have a lot to do this year. Thankfully, like I said, we've got a great collaborative community that I know is going to help us do it. There's going to be lots of opportunities for input throughout the year. So obviously, this is one of the first ones that we're kind of going public with as part of this process. But keep an eye on the newsletter and on the website. It's at oakarts.org/plan. We'll have all of those different sessions and whatnot for folks to sign up for, attend, and check kind of behind us as we make progress throughout the year. So at a high level, that's kind of that's the process for how this year is hopefully going to unfold, and what ultimately comes out of this. So when we look back to look forward a little bit, the last time Roanoke did, last and only time that Roanoke has ever done an arts and cultural plan was back in 2011. Like I mentioned, it's a 10-year plan, so 2021 should have been when we redid it. But there's just stuff happening globally where folks didn't really get together and work on a plan, and I think that's really fair. We were still working through all of the programs, everything that were part of the plan, and getting those deployed. So it felt okay to hang back for a few years, which brings us to today. The first edition of the Arts and Cultural Plan, I think we're around 80% complete of everything that that committee ultimately decided to do, which is kind of incredible to think about, and sets a really high bar for the next iteration of this plan. And as I personally began to think about this, I worried that, oh gosh, we're going to have to come up with everything from scratch. And, that's just not the case. We still have 20% of this plan that we can implement if we so choose. And we've got a really solid starting point with that other 80% that we can build on. So I'm sure that there will be completely new components in the next version of the plan, but we're also going to continue to build out what we've already done with programs like Arts Connect Neighbors that we can make, even stronger throughout the next iteration of the plan. So outside of that 2011 version, which if you have never looked at, I would encourage you to. It's really interesting to read. Again, it's available on the website, which I'll have linked here at the very end of tonight's conversation. It can be really intimidating when you open it up because you're going to see 40 some pages when you open it, but a lot of that is reference lists, data points, et cetera, et cetera. And the bulk of the actual plan is much, much shorter. So don't worry when you see how many pages there are there. Outside of that, there are some other highlights that have been kind of a key output of the 2011 plan, or other things that have tied into it. Like we've talked about a couple of times tonight, City Plan 2040, the Year of the Artist that happened in 22 to 23, the Buzz video series about all the good work that's going on, the Emerging Neighborhoods project. Economic development actually has an arts and culture page as part of their site. So that's kind of unusual within the city space, but a nice indicator of how important arts and culture is to kind of the core of what the city is doing from an economic development standpoint. And beyond that, we've got more recent reports out there around the annual report, the It's Here collective marketing efforts that started to happen towards the end of 2024 that were at GoFest. And then the Culture Check, which is coming soon. You can find a link to it on the roanokearts.org website if you go out there and take a look at it. But that was a collaborative project with a group of folks at Virginia Tech that kind of dove into our creative community and some insights that they've pulled out of that. So more details are coming about that in the very near future, which is a really cool project that I think is going to be a big influence on the work that we do as part of the next version of the Arts and Cultural Plan. So like I said, we're building on a great foundation and not having to start from fresh. But like I said, the first step in this kind of big, scary process, me personally, is I like to kind of set the tone for how we're going to progress and what's going to be really important to us. And every time I've had this conversation, be it with the commission or the steering committee, or folks within the city who are interested in this work, the first conversation that I always have with them is about values and what are the values going to be for our plan. So to that point, even though we're a small group tonight, I would like to invite y'all to give us some input that I can include with this. So you can do this activity. We're going to have a few of these this evening during the conversation. First, as we talk about the values, so you can either scan the QR code and do it on your phone. You can pull up the browser and go to Slido and drop in that number. But just take a moment, say 2 minutes, and begin to think about and submit some ideas for what you think the values should be for the next iteration of this plan. As some context, the values from 2011 plan that came out were advocacy and celebration, collaboration, education, innovation, and inclusion. So, we're looking for pretty broad topics, but even from that list, you can quickly see kind of the spirit of how that plan was formed and the goals that came out of them. This is always fun because it updates live as y'all submit. accessibility has been a big one. Mhm. Yep. I was really fascinated with this tool because I think it's really interesting that I know that one or two of you are typing at any given moment, but it's also creepy. Oh, we're starting to get some hierarchy here. So equity has suddenly become the core of our values to consider as we look at the next iteration of this plan. And it makes sense, right? Because that's already part of City Plan 2040. And it is touched on through inclusion in the last iteration of the plan. But we can always continue to refine that even more. So equity is a great one. I really like kind of the tone of some of the things that are included in here, like humanity and kindness and optimism. I like seeing things like transparency and openness, and accessibility. So anybody who wants to be a part of arts and culture in Roanoke to be able to be a part of it, right? Regardless of kind of ability, or socioeconomic status, folks should be able to reach this, be it in person, be it virtual. We should be able to meet them where they're at and make sure that they can be part of the conversation and experience everything that the rest of us get to experience. So I think there's some great nuggets in here. Is there anything that y'all are surprised seeing this word cloud that's not included in here?
Not surprised that like about anything that's not included, but I think like I chose equity, but I think inclusion is probably the better one because a lot of times and not here, but just in general, like people can, say like, okay, we want to go for equity or whatever, but inclusion is the higher level thing to work with because it doesn't really matter what people say. It's like what people actually do. Like, are you going to really do inclusion? Like, let's see who showed up. Who did you include? And I think that's probably the biggest one because it's like people can say whatever they want to say, but like, what will you actually do? And that's when you see people show up from all walks of life, and that's when it's really working.
Mhm.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
So I guess the only thing I don't see on here is any kind of education, any kind of training or education or things that help us understand the value of the arts, so by either participating or learning about how it's done. So I think I'd like to see more of that, more opportunities for people to be trained or just have experiences or to master a skill or grow as a
Mhm.
professional or even as a beginner. Some kind of formula for helping everybody become more um, engaged by actually
Mhm.
being part of an arts experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's definitely a really important component. One of the things, yes. One of the things that we'll get to here in a minute, when we talk about focus areas, that was an interesting thing that came out of one of our sessions was this idea of better defining like the pathways in our creative community. So if folks want to enter in as a beginner, and find a mentor, or if they want to do some sort of self-paced, self-initiated learning or whatnot, how are we facilitating and supporting that? How do we connect the experienced, with the new and vice versa, kind of a thing? So when we go back to that kind of idea of harmony with nature from from the 2040 plan, we can kind of reinterpret that of like, okay, how do we build our pathways through this nature that is within the city that also includes our creative community. So it's really fun to think about. And I think one of the areas that, Catherine, I'm really interested in personally. And I think it's going to come up here in a couple more minutes when we talk about some focus areas. So before we move on from values, is there anything else based on this conversation that you wish you didn't included in this word cloud? Awesome. I also have like a 7-second rule about silence that I'm like really comfortable with before I can move on. I can make, ooh, conversation. That's a good one. I like that. Yeah, it drives my team crazy because everybody always wants to fill the void. And I'm like, we just exist. We don't have to talk. It's okay. All right. So let's talk about discovery and how we're going to approach this. One of the things that we have to do in addition to kind of defining our values for work is we have to define our focus areas. And as I mentioned, I'm not a planner, I don't have a background in this. So I have to bring my own like personal lens and perspective to how I kind of break down these big scary things. And the way I do that in my medium when I work in digital is my background is in information architecture. So think like digital environments meets library science kind of an approach. And one of the kind of cornerstone frameworks that we use in that space is something called the Colon classification, which is a very, very old method for organizing information around 5 different dimensions that came out of a library program in India many, many, many years ago. And it has you examine these ideas through personality, matter, energy, space, and time. So you can really cover like a lot of basis when you're thinking about a topic, right? So as we think about our focus areas, we're going to use that same tool, Slido. And if you've still got it up on your phone, I'm going to bring up the next one and it's going to auto advance. So you don't have to rescan anything or reload anything. We're going to look at our focus areas through these kind of 5 dimensions and figure out what are those codes that when we look at our values, how do we apply them to these different areas to improve them through the next iteration of the plan? So the first question in that equation is personality. So who are we serving? So personality is all about the people. It's the communities, groups, and individuals that the arts and cultural plan serves. It's about understanding who benefits from the plan, whose voices need to be heard, and who plays a role in making it happen. So we're really talking about the human capital component, and which y'all have already identified as a really important kind of core value to this work, right? So when you think about personality, who are those people that we need to reach that we might not be thinking about reaching or might not be on our radar or might be historically overlooked in a process like this, who could benefit from either participating in the process or learning from it and kind of having it as an enrichment opportunity. Interesting, interesting. This already very much feels in line with the values that y'all have already identified.
Yeah, I go with that one.
Yep, I agree, Corey. Got a couple more folks typing. My block, elderly, yeah. There's a real aspirational quality to this group of words in here. I really, really like. Who else? Who else can this plan serve? Either to be informed by them or to benefit. Mhm, mhm. Local decision makers. That was something I wanted to prompt y'all with. Do you think business is part of this? Or business is? This definitely has an emphasis on the individual, which I think really goes back to that values conversation, right? Because that was all about like the humanity of it, and folks who are looking to be enriched by arts and culture. So that's really interesting. Mhm. Some diverse answers on here that I really like that I have not seen in previous conversations. So I'm curious, as we look at these, I feel like my gut says that some of these groups are really more difficult to maybe traditionally make part of the process. So if we take a group of individuals and say we want to focus on unhoused individuals. I mean, how do y'all see trying to either engage with or have them benefit from the next version of the arts and cultural plan? That's a heavy question for like a Tuesday night, but how does that work?
I think that's a great question because it's like for me anyway, like I had no idea that it was such a problem because like when we went to the Berglund Center for that event to help the unhoused, I expected, like people to show up, but I had no idea so many people would show up. So it's just it was a big eye opener for like, wow, there's a ton of people dealing with this. So just making people aware, like, hey, this is really a problem is was a good way to get people to be like, well, okay, how do we address it? Like people, I think, and I'm just speaking from my own perception. I just, like I knew people dealt with that, but there was a lot more people that shut up that I could have imagined.
So yeah, I was at that event that Corey's talking about, and one of the things I think that I would see, not so much that artists can go in and fix things like this, but that they could be more collaboration between artists and organizations and groups that are dedicated to working with these particular populations, because we don't know how to
Mm,
go in and address this, but maybe we might see a way to either help the caretakers, do some kind of collaboration between people who work in these very
mm,
challenging communities. Oh, and the one that we didn't put on there is people with using, alcohol and opioid abuse.
mhm,
People in recovery. That's not on that list, but those are people who really, benefit from connection and feeling included and being able to express themselves. But I think it'd be more what I could imagine is more of a partnership rather than going in
mm,
there and saying, well, people who've devoted their life and have the training to know how to do what is available to help these people to connect with them and to support them, bring
mhm.
attention to what their work is already doing rather than trying to, you know, solve these huge problems. Because I was also there with Corey, and it's definitely, it just felt a little bit like overwhelming to think that anybody can deal with. I mean, how do we help people who don't have a place to live? We couldn't even think of how to do an art project when they have no place to take what they make home. It's such a huge gap between understanding what life is like for people who don't have their basic needs met. So it'd be more like, how do we help get their basic needs met by working with the organizations that are devoted to that in a creative way?
I love that. Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about awareness of and using the arts as a vehicle to like drive that. Um, and I pass the Gainsborough Library almost every single day on my commute, and I see the apples, and I think about it every single day. Like it's so incredible the awareness that this community can like bring at large through the work that we do to, I think, maybe subjects that sometimes folks feel are like taboo or don't want to talk about because it can be uncomfortable. I think that's a really interesting way to consider how we can begin to kind of not only influence, but like have a real impact at the end of the day, and try to make somebody's life just a little bit better. It's really interesting. And again,
I
thank
think,
y'all. But
oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Uh, I think a way to approach the specifically with the problems that come up with the unhoused community that we have is even indirectly, not necessarily to address those problems, but to reframe the issues that they are. I know
Mhm.
that street performing in a very specific case, it is it is impossible to do any kind of street performing without including people who live in the space where you're performing. And
Mhm.
so reframing it as um, make sure these public spaces are available for everyone and
Mhm.
everyone is included. When I first started Busk Roanoke back in July, in partnership with Doug and Arts Connect and everything, um, one of the questions I kept getting was like, it's great that you want to make it more visitable and more fun and everything. What are you going to do about the homeless problem? How are you going to get rid of the homeless problem? And my response was, there is no getting rid of people from the last place they have found to rest.
Mhm.
They will be included and entertained. And
Yep.
so, in that same concept, when we're having issues trying to figure out, well, how are we going to um, do an art project to help uplift people who don't have a home to take it back to, these public spaces are that home. When I do a show, I'm in their living room, and it would be
Mhm.
just a slight parallel shift to think about doing something that um, reframes that. So if it's um, in a very easy example, having a when Christmas time comes around, there's a Christmas tree with all the ornaments of the kids program or whatever it is. Like you could include this display of people who are overlooked in these public spaces as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, Jefferson, I think that's a great point. Mhm. See, and this is why I love these conversations because we're talking about stuff that hasn't even come up yet, and why it's so important that we pull so many different folks with different perspectives so we can collect all of this and be really considerate and intentional in the work that we're doing as part of this. So the first one's always the hardest, right? So we pulled the band-aid off with personality. The one that comes after it is matter. So in this framework, when we talk about matter, we're talking about that. What are the key elements of our arts and culture in Roanoke that we need to prioritize? This comes back to that notion of things like education and inclusion. What are those programs or traditions or initiatives that are the most Roanoke that help kind of shape the cultural landscape that's here? So these can be, kind of keystone things that have happened in the past that we're really well known for, or it could be new ideas to the conversation about folks who are unhoused and how we might be able to include them in the process or raise awareness of that issue. So, what are we focusing on? What is the matter of the arts and cultural plan? I'll give you all a couple of minutes on this one. We got lots of typers. Y'all got a lot of thoughts about this. I'm excited to see. So authenticity, accessible resources, community, art. Looks like one of them got broken up into a bunch of words, but I think we can push that back together. We got the Daisy Arts
I think that was
Parade.
mine. I can sorry, it was kind of long. If you don't mind, I'll just say I
Yeah.
submitted art as community architecture. Like for
Mm,
example, the wonderful painted like pedestrian and bike lanes that people have put together and how
mhm.
that was done by communities.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that notion of community architecture. That's really fun.
Can we get another definition of matter?
Sure, I can go back.
Thank you.
There we go. So, the what of our plan? What are the key elements of Roanoke's arts and culture that we should prioritize? Think about the programs, traditions, or creative initiatives that are the most essential to shaping our cultural landscape. Features in here, a couple of them. That's encouraging. Share experiences. Yeah, I like that, Catherine. Mhm. Raw honesty. I really appreciate whoever put that in there. Opportunities, collaboration. Yeah, I like it. There's a lot of themes in here. And what I really appreciate about it is that very clearly has like a focus on our immediate community, but there are also little tangents that connect and like spread this out from a more regional perspective. When we think about things like collaboration and creative tourism, and the connection to nature and how that bridges so many of our municipalities that are in our region. Hmm. There's some interesting things to consider as part of matter and what we're focusing on. So when we think about the what, kind of the next natural segue is the how. So let's talk about energy. How do we do this? How do we make this process and this plan really successful? Are there specific processes or collaborations, thinking about story circles as an example, or different types of approaches that should drive our efforts in the next year? What's essential to continuing to uplift everything that we've already done, but then like drive it to be even more? How are we going to connect with folks? Does this feel like a big series of focus groups? Are they smaller conversations? Are they always in person? Are they virtual? Is it a mix of both? Is it a heavy emphasis on things like surveys? That was a big push with EarthSpace. How do y'all see us collaborating on the plan throughout the year? What's that energy that we're going to bring to it? Mhm. Yeah. We're not going to do the same old, same old. Need to do something different. Yeah, I like that. Agree, Karina, definitely. We have to make sure that like we're aligned, right? Before we can go out. And make sure that we're all talking from the same playbook. Get weird. Yes, 100%. Please. Somebody who I was talking to about the plan and the process, um, suggested a silent workshop. I still can't quite wrap my head around it, but he had the idea to explore like a specific topic through just like gestural, almost like miming. And I thought that was a really fun way to consider kind of how our physical space, how we communicate through our physical space. Limitations, I agree. Um, so to that point, y'all, when we think about the energy and the how of this process, obviously I don't want to exhaust people along the way. I don't want to overwhelm them with a number of events and a number of emails, a number of surveys. What feels right? How often should we go out to the community and ask them to participate in this? Or, do we just hope that they follow along with us? What's the balance there?
I would say to jump off of what you just said, probably just follow personal, like intense and genuine interests. For the last one, I submitted community gardens
Mhm.
because I absolutely love them, and I think that they accomplish some of the space beautification and the sort of generous ethos that I think we've been discussing.
Mhm.
Um, I think gardeners are some and naturalists are some of the most like open, generous people. Like it's a very abundance mindset for the most part.
Mhm.
And so yeah, maybe transforming some spaces. And there's so many. I'm always shocked how many like interesting groups of people there are around town. Like the more of them that I learn about just like what people are up to and what they're doing and how many people are actually really interested in a thing. Just like connect with them. Like you don't have to be the person that does everything. You can just have like you said the bones of the plan, the ethos,
Mhm.
and then just say this is what we're doing. Anybody want to join?
Right, exactly. Like because we have to make it approachable at the end of the day, right? Like this is kind of an intimidating ask, like to make this 10-year plan. So it's like if we can show up and meet people where they're at with something that they can react to and then have a response about it,
So
then it's a whole lot easier.
can I just say, just if we're just brainstorming, I think it'd
Mhm.
be, so many people don't even know about these plans. It's like,
Mhm.
I think we'd have to like really make an effort to make them more available, like printed copies in a coffee shop, on a bulletin board, in the library that people can take home and go, oh, this is what the city's planning. And they want to
Mhm.
know how do we feel about it, and
Yep.
make make it easy for people to actually like have a conversation about it. Like what about, putting notebooks in coffee shops to say we want you to jot down a few ideas for us so that people can actually like take a cup of coffee, take a notebook and jot a few lines down so that's in people's places. But also, I mean, I don't think I know anybody outside of the few people involved with this particular group that know we have a 2040 plan.
Hmm.
Especially young people who are going to be here in 2040, their lives are going to be really, they're going to be coming to their few, they're going to be really impacted by what's being planned today, but they don't even
Hmm.
know this plan exists. So I think we need to kind of start at the very beginning of
Yeah.
letting people know what is even going on.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's really well taken. And I love that idea of, I, using the coffee shop as the example. Not everything has to be this big formal event. Folks show up at like a very specific time to complete a very specific activity. It can be something organic, like, a notebook to collect ideas, or maybe it's a very small performance. Jefferson, maybe it's kind of a busking thing that includes a, hey, by the way, if you enjoyed this, we're also working on this plan that, may do X, Y, or Z for the future of our city. Um, we don't have to have a conversation about it now, but like, hey, go check out this website and like read about what we're doing, and give us some feedback on where we're at and like where we're going. So I think there's like very micro kind of moments that can happen along the way, as well as those really big ones, which is kind of interesting to think about.
I want to second Catherine's point, and I was personally very like heartened and impressed when I learned about the plan, and that was rather recently, unfortunately. And so I think a lot of people would probably be really behind it if it were more well known. The plan, and honestly, even just like Arts Connect Tuesdays and what like the Roanoke Arts Commission is doing, and like we could ask local businesses, grocery stores, like any sort of publications, like if we had some kind of little pamphlet, how like at businesses and doctors' offices, like there's like a little magazine stand that you can just take one and go, like churches, just like anywhere we can think of that we can leave these places so that we can reach the broadest variety of person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like
completely agree.
or like a QR code at different I don't know what they're called, the like but at different like trails and things like that. There's usually a little like sort
Mm-hmm.
of covered sign that'll like tell you where you are and things like that. Just like put one there, put a sticker,
Hmm.
just like put it everywhere.
Yeah, just blank out. Hmm. Yeah, make it hard to escape.
There you go.
I like it. I like it. All right, y'all are doing great. You're three down. We've got two more to do. They're the easiest ones because they're the most literal. So we talked about energy. So space is up next. We've touched on this a little bit already. Obviously, space is the where. Where does arts and culture happen in the city? Where do we want it to happen in the city? What places need more attention or investment? This can be a physical space. We've talked a lot about nature. This can be in a gallery, or it can be more of a virtual space where folks come together. As we've talked about, making sure that the things that we're considering, are very accessible in a variety of modalities. So when we think about that, where for the next iteration of this plan, where is our focus? Where should arts and culture be thriving that maybe it's not today, but we want to see that change over the next 10 years? Good thing it's here. Yep. A lot of this makes sense. When we think about all of our new venues that may be coming, the ones that are already here that we need to support. I like that overlap in science and tech spheres. That makes a lot of sense. Underserviced neighborhoods. We have that emerging neighborhood report that council recently approved. So we definitely have some target neighborhoods where we could put some emphasis from an arts and cultural programming standpoint. Public walkable spaces, that 100% makes sense. We've seen so much success with like the stormwater drain projects, the crosswalk projects, the street mural projects. I mean, that 100% lines up. Places where children are. Oh, here we go. Places where children are. That makes sense. Hospitals, gatherings, churches, stores, grocery. Yep. Communals. Yep. Yeah, a lot of this makes sense. When we talk about community and connection to one another, and where do we find those spaces that are able to kind of coexist. So this all makes sense to me. Science in the tech sphere. That's a really interesting one that hasn't come up yet. So thank you for whomever suggested that one. See, very little, very easy. When we talk about the spaces where we want things to thrive. So we talk about the how and the where and the why and the who. So we got one big question left, right? And that's the when. So that's our final one. So that's time. This is a 10-year plan. So how do we ensure that this is meaningful in the long term and impacts the right folks that we want it to impact? This can be one of those things where when you look at the 2011 plan, they break down each goal or each strategy into what's a short-term component for the immediate, what's kind of more of a medium-ish kind of goal for it, and then what's a long-term goal. So things don't just happen and then we forget about them. If we come out of this process with a bunch of 10-year goals, that's great, but it's going to feel like we're not doing anything initially because we're not going to see anything completed. So we have to figure out, how to balance that short, medium, and long. So kind of across that spectrum of time, how do we think about this plan being successful and meaningful across such a wide spread of years? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think something like that. I mean, it kind of seems cheesy to say for time, but timing matters, right? To show up. Yeah, that one of the things that we've been talking about is once the plan is over, it's not just the plan, it just goes into implementation mode and kind of everybody goes quiet and these programs just happen. But when we're going to talk about fulfilling our promises and continuing to show up for each other, that we have kind of like a regular check-in to say, how are we doing with this? We all worked hard for a year to come up with the next iteration of this plan. So it's been 1 year. What's happened? Where do we go from here? So we don't show up in a decade and hope that we've crossed a bunch off of our list. Um, yeah, inclusive, welcoming environment. Yeah. And I mean, even tonight is a perfect example of this. Consistency and showing up is how we drive this forward, and how, for me personally, I've already taken away things from this conversation tonight that haven't come up in other discussions, and really just demonstrates the value of, again, how are we creating a long-term impact through this work? Retain talent, accountability, undeniable value. So let me ask y'all this, kind of more of an open conversation rather than in the world word cloud. When we talk about things like undeniable value, if it's 5 years from now and we're looking back on our work, what does undeniable value look like? What is a metric that you would say like, yes, the plan was successful? Because I agree, like I love demonstrating value, but something like this, what does that actually look like?
I think it's when people can look back and see when things change for them and they can tie that to something that we did or a program that they took part in, something that opened their mind to be like, wow, we met new friends because of this, or our life improved some other way. And they're going to say, well, that was because of this thing that we did. And they are going to, see that clearly.
Well,
Mhm.
can I say something?
Of course.
I just wanted to say this question is really hard for me to answer because it's a question for me my whole life. Like whenever I'd say I want to be an artist as a young person, it was always like, well, you can't make a living, or what's the value of that? So it's definitely something that is a deep question. What is the value of arts and culture? And for a lot of people, it's an easy answer to say there is no value because it's not something they've been educated about or experienced themselves as a young person. And I really think that that's a big part of it is getting people exposed to the arts as in a way that when they're young and they can experience things in a different way. So I would say like improved quality of life, but I don't think
Mhm.
that it's up to us to decide that. And I do want to know, I think when I was last at one of you guys' get-togethers, I brought that book, Your Brain on Art. Do you remember that?
That
Have you
feels
read?
familiar.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, there's these two people who wrote a book, and it's basically looking at the actual science behind what arts experiences do for different parts of the brain. And it's the work is there. It's not like I don't think we can do that type of clear, here is what somebody's brain looked like before and now what it looks like after. But it was really encouraging to me. So I think even educating ourselves about what is the value of the art so that we can confidently say, well, this is what it does. This is how it helps people process stress, or this is how it adds to longevity, or this is how it adds to mental and emotional well-being. Just to really learn that ourselves so that we can
Mhm.
really be ambassadors to this and not because I was like, I have that book on my bookshelf. I don't want to bring it out, but I kind of feel like Doug said the authors were coming for the women's luncheon at the art museum, unless I dreamed that. Do you remember that?
That does sound really familiar.
Yeah. So I think we really the science is there and the proof is there, but we don't have a very good way of sharing that. I think right now just educating ourselves and each other about how this has already been documented. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like how do we prove that this has an impact? It's already
Right.
been done. How do we
Hmm.
share that information?
Exactly. Like 'cause before we can ever, kind of what Karina was saying earlier, like before we can educate everybody else, we have to educate ourselves, right? So I think that could be really interesting. And I wonder if we could bring them as part of this process.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find it. Buddy.
I think that would be really, really interesting. Hmm.
While she's looking for it, which I'm gonna write that down because that sounds awesome.
Right.
Um, I wanted to also add that I think art in itself lends a sort of value, and in that it gives the impression that someone cares. Um, like, and I think that might be a almost a long-term goal of just like driving around town or being driven or walking and just like seeing that someone took the time to like put up a mural or
Hmm.
do something nice, beautify the space, make a dedication. Like someone thought about this and they cared. And like, I think I mean, there's some haters here and there. I've seen some very fun conversations on Facebook that are just like, okay, But I think most people pass these things and it kind of adds to their perception of the area. Like I
Mhm.
remember a while back, I was driving down, I want to say it's fairly far down Melrose, and I saw like a mural being randomly put up on a building. And my first thought was like, that's really nice because it was like a parking lot. It was a fairly nondescript building, and like it was just really nice. And
Mhm.
I think it adds to your perception of your surroundings. In a way, it makes it special.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to follow up with this because I would love to have an actual conversation with people who have read this book. I think I sorted the library and then I bought it because I'm like, I need to learn this, not just learn a little bit about it. The book is called Your Brain on Art: How the Arts Transform Us. It's not brand new, but I would love to, I think it'd be really important for us all to really understand this for our own mental health and to be able to have that kind of deep conversation with other people and
Mhm.
experience this for ourselves. And it's a real pep talk for people working in the arts when we have such a, decades long bad branding of the arts being something just for the rich, just for the elite, just for people who have extra thousands of dollars for paintings over the sofa. That's the common concept that people have. So it's real
Mhm.
easy to dismiss first thing off the budget, right? Arts classes, arts education.
Yep.
So how do we counter that? This book is a really good argument for that. It's basically the neurobiology of how the arts affect us.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
Sounds like we need to have like a book club as
I
like part
would
of like
be in
discovery
that
and
book club.
listening.
I really would. And I really can't figure out how to find out for sure. But if they are coming, the two authors are coming, it would be really wonderful to be able to sit down with these people because they've devoted, I think it took them 2 years to accumulate the work, the research and the work that's in this book. So I think it would be wonderful to kind of, but it's basically done what you're saying. How do we make sure that there's an impact? This is a great way to see what they've how we can like have metrics to measure
Mhm.
what how are we seeing? Are we seeing more literacy? Are we seeing less mental health issues, less opioid addictions, less alcohol abuse, less violence? If we're seeing some impact in our community, those are the things I think would really carry some weight.
Mhm.
that is really interesting. I like your idea about the book club. I'm, helping to facilitate the Pilgrim on Tinker Creek conversations upcoming. We can see how that goes, and use the what we learn along the way. Maybe we can have another read along with that book.
Yes, I love it.
Oh, I
Absolutely
know.
love it.
I would have to read this book all over again. Just opening it up, it's just like, and I think those of us who've been in town who were able to experience Swoon's work. I mean, she did such a really beautiful
Mhm.
way of integrating arts and mental health and personal story. I mean, she was a great addition to all of our community through the culture that the museums provides for us, which we are very fortunate to have.
Mhm. Yeah. Selfishly, I always get really proud when I have friends from out of town come in and they go to the Topman and they're like, "This is here."
It's a
Like,
gem. It is a
it
real
is.
gem. I'm very, very much in the same way. I feel like we are so fortunate to have such a high quality museum for this community.
Yep, agree. Good conversation. Oh, y'all, this makes me so happy. We have so many good ideas already. I just love it. I have one more slide for y'all, and y'all can hang in there with me for like another couple of minutes. And that's what the heck do we do next? Because we got a lot of good ideas, right? But now we got to carry them forward. We talked about the importance of things like consistency and showing up, and continuing to do what we say that we're going to do. So what do we do at this point? What's ahead? So as I mentioned, we've got kind of a broader steering committee that's kind of behind the scenes that's meeting on a quarterly basis. We have a smaller kind of core committee that meets monthly to kind of work through kind of the nitty gritty and the details on things. But beyond that, as we're in this discovery phase right now, this is where we need y'all's help. to the conversation about, does anybody even know about City Plan 2040? Does anybody even know that we have an arts and cultural plan? Well, let's start talking about this. Doug and I are trying to collect all of the relevant information, all the documents, all the resources on the website at the URL, which is there at the top of the slide. Begin to push that out if you can. Obviously, social is a weird place right now for a lot of different reasons. So, if it feels weird, don't do it. But if that turns out to be a space where you feel like you can share that, I would appreciate it. If not, have a conversation with somebody about it. A lot of the drumbeat tonight was just about connection and having that moment to share an experience with somebody. And this could be one of those things when maybe you want to talk about, where should we focus our arts and culture in the city beyond these kind of emerging neighborhoods, or how do we do it? Or, as we get back through the book, here's how these authors are defining value. How do you see that? Are there other metrics there that we can use in this process? And it help us continue to think of folks, be it an individual, a group, an organization, a business, that we should make sure that we're engaging with in this process. Roanoke is by no means, a large city, but there's still a lot of people here for a small group to be able to connect with. And I don't want to accidentally overlook somebody if we didn't try to capture as many folks as we can in this process. So think about who we should really be trying to engage with as we go forward with this. And then kind of part and parcel with that is, as we get to that listening phase, we've talked about this idea of like the book club. We've talked about story circles a couple of times tonight. We've obviously got a couple of frameworks that we can use to begin engaging with folks. But to the one suggestion, like, let's get weird. Think about unusual and outside of the box ways that we can kind of handle community engagement. I don't think personally that an arts and culture plan is gonna have a lot of folks show up at city council ready to rant and rave like other plans that have been put forward recently. But gosh, I also don't want anybody to show up at city council and say, I didn't know about this. If somebody chooses not to participate, that's fine. I get it. I want them to at least know about it. So think about those different kinds of formats or events, even down to the micros of, a notebook at a coffee shop or a pop-up busking event, or just little moments where we can engage with folks in their lives and begin to pass out those QR codes or pamphlets or whatever that medium is to show them that this is happening.
Yeah, I would think just having like one thought, one part of the plan, like what are we doing what is the 2040 plan? That's trees. And just have a poster for that and have that be a contest. Design the poster for our 2040 trees plan. So people, I think there's so many good things in there. And I think so many young people who are really looking for purpose and experiences could really grab onto these things, but I don't think they know it's out there. I know in my circle, I'm the only one that knows about it. I'm always telling people more than what they want to hear.
But people are always like, John, how do you know that? And I'm like, because I'm really nerdy and I watch all the city council meetings.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating.
I like what you said earlier, become inescapable. Like, I genuinely think that's probably the way to go. I'm looking at the Roanoke Arts Commission website and thinking also about the It's Here initiative. And I think the branding that we have is very strong. Like, I know that sounds really cynical next to the, lovely values discussion that we had earlier, but isn't there that little factoid that's like the average person has to see something like 5 to 10 times before it like really sticks in their mind and they like might actually engage in a potential transaction with the item or whatever it is? So we probably just really need to be out there.
Yeah. And also if you put something in somebody's hand, if you hand somebody a little flyer or a pamphlet, that's going to have a much bigger impact than something that they just glance at or that they see on a computer. So I think just having like little tiny small flyers printed with specifics that people might have of interest that they can, take home and put on their fridge that are beautifully designed. you know?
Exactly. Can we send those along with our artists when they're doing Arts Connect Neighbors
Oh, yeah.
functions?
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
definitely. I would be happy to have a copy of the 2040 hard copy that I can look at, read, turn the pages, pass on to somebody, underline, you know what I mean? Like really
mhm.
understand it and learn it rather than I'm not a great learner on the computer or easy for me to overlook things or just space out.
Yeah, totally. No, I think it's really well taken. I was even thinking, as we've been having this conversation, I was just like, gosh, do we need to start reaching out to all of the neighborhood groups and like getting on their schedules for the regular neighborhood meetings when they have them? Because I feel like folks who show up at neighborhood meetings tend to be the more engaged and maybe more on for this kind of message as a starting point. Um, oh, I
That makes a lot
love
of
the walk-up
sense.
mural. Yeah, I like that idea a lot, Jefferson.
The other thing
Yeah, that's
that
really
came to
fun.
mind immediately as just like a quick thing to do if we happen to have a little budget for it is
Hmm.
everybody has their little bespoke or giant rather water bottle, the Stanley or the whatever. I love the
Yes.
it's here sticker. Like it makes me
Hmm.
so happy whenever I look at it on my giant water bottle thing. And like that's a thing that people would see every day in a very small way that it just becomes part of their ecosystem.
Hmm.
So just like stuff like that,
Yeah.
probably. Like whoever came up with that idea was, I want to copy it.
Yeah, that's a great point. So just let that steep. Let it knock around in y'all's heads. And if you have ideas, you can always ping me. You can ping Doug. Because obviously we have a whole year ahead of us for this. So nothing is finite. Nothing has been finalized. And we're gonna try to be really adaptive as we go along. So we're not kind of um, tied to a certain procedure plan and kind of learn as we go and adjust for that. But I am just so grateful that you have given me, 90 minutes of your evening to kind of learn a little bit more about kind of the background for how we came to this, why we're doing it, what the process is going to be, and kind of these initial things that we're thinking about from a values and a focus areas perspectives. I know I've said it a couple of times, but I'm so grateful for the conversation because there are things tonight that we've talked about that I haven't talked about in having several of these. So I think it really speaks to again how wonderfully like diverse the perspectives are within our creative community, and I'm so thankful for y'all sharing your thoughts tonight and entertaining the conversation. It makes me even more excited to kind of dig in and do this big work over the year. And I hope as we move forward, we'll certainly keep everybody up to date through the newsletter. Um, but keep checking out that roanokearts.org/plan page where we are going to be posting all the updates. But in the meantime, like I said, if you've got a question, if you have an idea, I'm a processor, so I'll have a great idea from this conversation like 4 days at like 3 a.m. If that happens, just reach out, let us know. So we can incorporate that as we kind of move forward. And I'm really, really, really looking forward to seeing some of y'all at our engagement events so we can make this an even better 2025 plan following 2011. So thank y'all again for coming tonight. And like I said, if you've got any other ideas or feedback so we can make this even better, I'm just so appreciative for your time.
Well, thank you for hosting the conversation. It's been really great.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, y'all have a great rest of your Tuesday evening. If it gets cool, are we cool again? I don't even know, but stay warm or stay cool, whichever way you need to go. I see Catherine bundling up, so I'm kind of wondering if it's gotten cold outside.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Yes, it was great to see you.
Hi,
Bye-bye.
All
everyone.
right. Bye,
Thank you.
y'all.
I got to go take my little dog out.
Oh, good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for hosting.
Yes. Bye, y'all.